They say grief comes in waves, but nobody warns you that sometimes those waves carry piranhas. I was 46 years old when I found my husband dead in our bedroom, and 46 years and 3 minutes old when I found the second phone in his nightstand. Marcus had been texting someone named Baby right up until his heart gave out, apparently mid-conversation about their weekend plans. The irony wasn't lost on me that his last words to me that morning had been about picking up his blood pressure medication. I stood there in our bedroom, holding that phone, watching the dots appear and disappear as Baby tried to figure out why Marcus had suddenly gone silent. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it when my daughter Emma walked in and saw her father's body. Her scream brought our neighbors running, brought the paramedics, brought my other daughter Sophie racing home from college, but nothing could bring back the version of my life I'd been living just 5 minutes earlier. The funeral was exactly what Marcus would have wanted, which meant exactly what his mother Delilah wanted, which meant I had very little say in any of it. She'd swept in like a tornado wearing black Chanel, taking over every arrangement, every detail, every decision. "My poor boy," she kept saying, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief that matched her outfit. "My beautiful, faithful boy." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Marcus's father, Richard, stood beside her like a granite pillar, nodding solemnly as person after person from their church offered condolences. The Church of Eternal Grace had been the center of Marcus's parents' lives for 30 years, a sprawling megachurch with 3,000 members and a pastor who drove a Mercedes. Marcus and I had stopped attending years ago, much to Delilah's eternal disappointment. She'd never forgiven me for leading her son astray, as she put it, though the truth was, Marcus had been the one who wanted to leave. He'd said he was tired of the performance, the judgment, the endless fundraising for a building fund that never seemed to build anything. 3 days after the funeral, I was still finding Marcus's things everywhere: his coffee mug on the counter, his jacket on the back of the chair, his secret phone, which I'd hidden in my dresser drawer because I wasn't ready to deal with what it represented. Emma was barely eating, moving through the house like a ghost. Sophie had withdrawn completely, spending hours locked in her room. They were 17 and 19, too young to lose their father, too old not to understand that death was permanent. I was trying to figure out how to be enough parent for both of them and enough widow to satisfy everyone's expectations when Delilah called. "We need to talk about the house," she said without preamble. "Richard and I have been discussing it, and we think it's best if you girls move in with us for a while. You shouldn't be alone at a time like this." I could hear the calculation in her voice, the way she was already rearranging our lives to suit her needs. "We're fine here," I said. "This is our home. That house is too big for just the 3 of you," Delilah continued as if I hadn't spoken. "And with Marcus gone, you'll need help with the expenses. Richard and I are prepared to take over the mortgage payments, of course. We wouldn't want you to lose everything Marcus worked so hard for." There it was, the insinuation that I couldn't manage on my own, that I needed to be rescued by my in-laws. Never mind that I had my own career as a dental hygienist, that I'd been working full-time throughout our marriage, that Marcus and I had bought this house together with money we'd both earned. "I appreciate the offer, but we'll manage," I said, keeping my voice level. "The girls need stability right now, and that means staying in their own home, in their own rooms, with their own things around them." Delilah's silence was pointed. "Well," she said finally, "I hope you know what you're doing. The church family is very concerned about you 3. Pastor Mike mentioned that he hasn't seen you at any services since the funeral. People are starting to talk." That was the first warning shot, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I was too buried in my own grief and rage to see what Delilah was setting up. I'd found more messages on Marcus's phone, had traced Baby back to a woman named Crystal, who worked at the gym Marcus claimed to visit every Tuesday and Thursday evening. She'd sent flowers to the funeral, signed, "With deepest sympathy, Crystal." The audacity of it had left me breathless. I'd spent an entire night going through that phone, reading 2 years' worth of messages that painted a picture of a relationship I'd been too naive or too trusting to see. Marcus had been living a double life, complete with weekend getaways he'd disguised as business trips, and a whole separate apartment he'd been renting across town. The money he'd been spending on Crystal and her 2 children, because of course she had children, because of course Marcus had been playing house with another family, explained the mysterious drain on our savings account that he'd blamed on bad investments. I should have told someone. I should have shown Emma and Sophie the evidence of their father's betrayal before the narrative got away from me. but I was trying to protect them, trying to preserve some version of their father that they could mourn, without this complicated, ugly truth getting in the way. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming that Delilah would grieve her son and move on, that she'd leave us alone to rebuild our lives. I'd forgotten that Delilah had never met a situation she couldn't manipulate, a story she couldn't rewrite to cast herself as the victim. I'd forgotten that in her world, everything was about appearances, about what the church family thought, about maintaining the fiction that her life was blessed and her family was perfect, and I was about to become the villain in whatever story she was telling. The first time I heard what Delilah had been saying about me, I was at the grocery store. Sarah Chen, one of the mothers from Emma's school, stopped her cart next to mine and gave me a look that was equal parts pity and disapproval. "I heard about what happened," she said carefully, "with Marcus's mother. I just want you to know that not everyone believes it." My stomach dropped. "Believes what?" I asked, though some instinct told me I didn't want to know the answer. Sarah glanced around as if checking for witnesses. "The stuff about you kicking Delilah out of Marcus's life, refusing to let her see him when he was sick, keeping the girls away from their grandparents. Linda Morrison told me that Delilah has been going to their church prayer groups talking about how devastated she is that you've cut her off completely, how she doesn't even know where her granddaughters are living now." The grocery store suddenly felt too hot. Too bright, too full of people who might be listening. "That's not true," I said, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. "None of that is true. Marcus wasn't sick. He had a heart attack out of nowhere. And I haven't cut anyone off. Delilah calls me almost every day trying to get us to move in with her." Sarah's expression shifted, and I could see her recalculating. "She said you'd say that," she said quietly. "She said you've been so traumatized by everything that you're not thinking clearly, that you need help but you're too proud to accept it. Linda said Delilah broke down crying at Bible study, talking about how she'd failed as a mother because she couldn't protect her son from—" She stopped abruptly, her cheeks flushing. "From what?" I pressed, and I could feel my heart starting to race. Sarah looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "I don't want to repeat gossip," she said, "but Delilah said something about Marcus's real problems, the ones you didn't want anyone to know about." She didn't give details, but the implication was pretty clear. I abandoned my cart right there in the cereal aisle and drove straight to Delilah's house, a sprawling ranch in a gated community where every lawn looked identical, and every mailbox had a small American flag. Richard answered the door, his face impassive as always. "Is this a good time?" I asked, though I didn't wait for an answer before pushing past him into the foyer. Delilah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression shifting from surprise to something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Well," she said, "I wondered when you'd come by. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." The normalcy of the offer, the domestic mundanity of it, made my anger spike even higher. "What have you been telling people about me?" I demanded. "What lies are you spreading about Marcus? About our family?" Delilah's face rearranged itself into wounded innocence. "I don't know what you mean. I've only been sharing my grief with my church family, looking for support during this difficult time. You told Sarah Chen that I kept you away from Marcus, that he was sick and I prevented you from seeing him. You're telling people that I've cut you off from your granddaughters. None of that is true and you know it." I was shaking now, months of suppressed rage finally finding a target. Delilah set down her dish towel with exaggerated care. "I think your grief is making you paranoid, dear. I've been very careful about what I say to people. If others have misunderstood my meaning, well, I can't control how people interpret things." She glanced at Richard, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps you should consider that therapy we discussed. You're clearly not coping well." That's when I understood what she was doing. She was laying groundwork, creating a narrative where I was unstable, unreliable, a grieving widow who couldn't be trusted to accurately report events. Anything I said to contradict her story would be dismissed as the ravings of someone in crisis. "I want you to stop," I said, forcing myself to speak calmly despite the trembling in my hands. "I want you to stop talking about me, about us, to anyone. If you have something to say to me, say it to my face, but leave my daughters out of whatever game you're playing." Delilah's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something cold and calculating beneath it. "Game?" she repeated. "My son is dead. My only child is gone. And you're accusing me of playing games?" She pressed the dish towel to her eyes, though I noticed no actual tears. "Richard, maybe you should walk her out. I don't think I can handle this right now." Richard moved toward me, not threatening but hurting, and I found myself backing toward the door. I loved Marcus, Delilah called after me. Whatever else you think, know that I loved my son, and I love my granddaughters. Nothing you do can change that. I sat in my car outside their house for 20 minutes, trying to calm down enough to drive. I'd handled that all wrong. I knew. I'd gone in angry and left looking exactly as unstable as Delilah was claiming I was. But what else could I do? How do you fight someone who's weaponizing their own grief, who's using the sympathy of their community as a shield for spreading lies? I thought about going to the church, talking to Pastor Mike directly, but I had no relationship with him, no credibility in that community. I'd be the outsider trying to contradict one of their most devoted members. The power imbalance was staggering. I drove home and found Emma sitting on the porch, her face pale and her eyes red. "Mom," she said as I got out of the car. "Some people came by. From Grandma's church." My blood went cold. What people? What did they want? Emma stood up, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm afternoon. "There were 3 women. They said they were from the prayer circle and they wanted to pray with us, to offer support. I told them we were okay, but they kept insisting. They said Grandma Delilah told them we might need help, that we'd been struggling. One of them asked if we had enough food in the house, if we were managing our bills okay. It was so weird, Mom. Like they were checking to see if we were neglecting ourselves or something." I pulled Emma into a hug, feeling her thin shoulders shake slightly. She'd lost weight since Marcus died. We all had. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I told them we were fine and asked them to leave. But Mom," the way they looked at me, it was like they felt sorry for me but also like they didn't believe me, like they thought I was covering something up. That night, I finally told Emma and Sophie everything. I showed them Marcus's second phone, walked them through the messages, explained about Crystal and the apartment and the money. Sophie cried silently, tears streaming down her face while she stared at the phone screen. Emma just got very quiet, very still, in a way that scared me more than tears would have. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Sophie asked finally. "Before the funeral, before we spent all that time listening to Grandma talk about what a wonderful man Dad was?" I wanted to say I was protecting them, but the words felt hollow now. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you deserved to mourn your father without all this complication. But Grandma Delilah is telling people that I'm the problem, that I'm unstable, and I need you both to know the truth. I need you to understand what really happened." Emma picked up the phone, scrolling through the messages with a clinical detachment that worried me. "There's more here," she said. "Look at this one from 6 months ago. Crystal is asking Dad about the procedure and whether he's talked to his parents about it yet." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw a message I'd missed before. Crystal saying she understood it was complicated, but that the kids deserved to know Marcus was their father, that they couldn't keep lying forever. My hands went numb. "What procedure?" Sophie asked, leaning over to read. "What is she talking about?" I scrolled backward, piecing together a conversation that made my stomach turn. Crystal's 2 children, the ones Marcus had been supporting, weren't from a previous relationship. They were Marcus's biological children, conceived through IVF because Crystal had fertility issues. He'd been their father for 4 years. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "Dad had 2 other kids. He had a whole other family." The room tilted sideways for a moment. I'd known about the affair, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a deliberate, sustained construction of an alternate life. Marcus had been a father to 2 children I'd never met. Children who were roughly the same ages as Emma and Sophie had been when he'd started this relationship. "Does Grandma know?" Sophie asked, and that was the question that made everything click into place. I scrolled further back, found messages between Marcus and his mother, found the answer I'd been dreading. Delilah had known everything. She'd known about Crystal, known about the children, had even met them. There were pictures Marcus had sent her. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, blonde and smiling, standing next to their grandmother at what looked like a park. The caption read, "Mom met her other grandchildren today. Finally feels like a complete family." The date was 18 months ago. I felt Emma reading over my shoulder, felt her body go rigid beside me. "She knew," Emma said flatly. "Grandma knew Dad was cheating on you. She knew about those kids, and her voice broke. She still came to our house and talked about what a good man he was. She still acted like we were her only grandchildren. Sophie grabbed the phone from my hands and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a crack and fell to the floor. Screen shattered. "I hate her," Sophie said, and her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "I hate both of them. How could they do this to us? We sat there for hours, the three of us, going through everything we knew, piecing together a timeline of betrayal that stretched back years. The business trips were visits to Crystal. The extra hours at work were time with his other children. The money missing from our savings had gone towards setting up a trust fund for kids I'd never met. And through it all, Delilah had known, had supported it, had probably encouraged it. I remembered now the odd comments she'd made over the years. Little digs about how I wasn't giving Marcus what he needed, how some men required more than one woman could provide, how traditional marriage wasn't always enough for modern men with modern needs. I'd thought she was just being her usual critical self, finding new ways to suggest I was inadequate. I hadn't realized she was literally advocating for her son to have a second family. "We need to tell people," Emma said around midnight, when we were all exhausted and hollow-eyed. "We need to show them what Dad really was. What Grandma knew. We can't let her keep lying about us." But I thought about Delilah's network, her church with its 3,000 members, her prayer circles and Bible studies and ladies' luncheons. I thought about how she'd already positioned herself as the grieving mother, the abandoned grandmother, the victim of my instability. Who would believe us? Who would look at a broken phone full of deleted messages and side with the outsider family against one of their most devoted members? "We need to be smart about this," I said. "We need evidence, real evidence, the kind people can't dismiss or explain away, and we need to wait for the right moment." Emma looked skeptical, but Sophie nodded slowly. "What kind of moment?" she asked. I didn't have an answer yet, but I was starting to form a plan. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove to the address I'd found in Marcus's phone for the apartment he'd been renting. It was in a nice complex on the east side of town. The kind of place with a swimming pool and a gym and guest parking that never had enough spaces. I sat in my car for 30 minutes, watching people come and go, wondering which unit was his, wondering if Crystal still lived there, or if she'd moved after Marcus died. I was about to leave when I saw her, a petite blonde woman in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, holding the hands of 2 children as they walked toward the parking lot. The boy looked about 7, the girl maybe 5. They had Marcus's nose, his dark eyes, his way of tilting his head when they looked up at their mother. I watched Crystal buckle them into a silver Honda Civic, watched her smooth the girl's hair back from her face with a tenderness that made my chest ache. This woman had loved my husband. These children had called him Daddy, and I was the ghost in this scenario, the wife who existed somewhere in the background of their lives, the obstacle that Marcus had been planning to remove. Crystal pulled out of the parking lot, and I followed at a distance. Not sure what I was hoping to accomplish, but unable to stop myself. She drove to an elementary school, walked the kids inside, then headed to a Starbucks where she ordered something complicated and sat at a corner table with her laptop. I parked where I could see her through the window and tried to figure out what I was feeling. Anger, yes, but also a strange sort of curiosity. What had Marcus told her about me? What story had he created to justify having 2 families? I watched her type, occasionally sip her coffee, check her phone with a sad expression that suggested she was still grieving too. After 40 minutes, she closed her laptop, gathered her things, and walked out to her car. I was still sitting there, frozen, when she knocked on my passenger window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Crystal gestured for me to roll down the window, her expression unreadable. "You've been following me," she said. It wasn't a question. I opened my mouth, closed it, then just nodded. What was the point of denying it? Crystal glanced around the parking lot, then opened my passenger door and slid into the seat beside me. Up close, she was younger than I'd expected, maybe 32 or 33, with the kind of natural beauty that didn't require much makeup. "I'm sorry about Marcus," she said quietly. "I know you must hate me, and you have every right to. But I loved him, and my kids loved him. They're devastated." The casual way she said "my kids," as if I should already know about them, as if their grief was equal to my daughter's grief, made something snap inside me. "Did you know about us?" I asked. "Did you know he had a wife and 2 daughters living across town while he was playing house with you?" Crystal's face flushed. Of course I knew. Marcus was always honest with me about his situation. He told me the marriage was dead, that you 2 stayed together for the girls, but that there was no love left. He said you had your own life, your own friends, that you barely spoke to each other anymore. "That's not true," I said, and I could hear my voice rising. "We had problems. Every marriage does, but we were together. We were a family." He told me he was working late, that he had business trips, that he was at the gym. He lied to me every single day for years. Crystal looked genuinely surprised, and I realized that Marcus had played us both, had created two completely different versions of reality, and convinced each of us that we had the truth. He said you knew, Crystal said slowly. He said you'd agreed to an open arrangement, that you were okay with him having another relationship as long as he was discreet about it. He said you didn't want to know the details, but that you understood he needed more than you could give him. The audacity of it took my breath away. Marcus had told this woman that I'd consented to her existence, that I was somehow complicit in this betrayal. I never agreed to anything, I said. I didn't know you existed until I found his phone after he died. Crystal went very still, her hands clenched in her lap. Oh God, she whispered. Oh God, he lied to me. He lied to both of us. She looked at me with something like horror in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I really thought you knew. He showed me texts that he said were from you, talking about how you were fine with the arrangement, how you just wanted him to be happy. I believed him. My head was spinning. What texts? Show me. Crystal pulled out her phone, scrolled through old messages, and handed it to me. There were screenshots of conversations supposedly between Marcus and me, casual exchanges about his girlfriend, and how I hoped she was treating him well, how I was glad he'd found happiness even if our marriage hadn't worked out. The number at the top was mine, but the words weren't. I never sent these, I said, staring at the screen. These aren't real. He must have faked them somehow, created fake screenshots to show you. The Crystal took her phone back, looking at the messages with new eyes. Why would he do that? Why go through all that trouble? Because he wanted both lives, I said, and the truth of it settled over me like a weight. He wanted to keep our family intact, keep up appearances for his parents and our friends, but he also wanted you and your kids. He wanted everything, and he was willing to lie to everyone to get it. Crystal was quiet for a long moment. His mother knew, she said finally. Delilah. She visited us several times. She was actually really kind to me and the kids. She said she understood that Marcus needed a proper Christian wife who could give him a big family, that one woman alone couldn't fulfill a man's needs. She quoted Bible verses about it, about how men in the Old Testament had multiple wives and it was God's plan. I felt like I'd been punched. Delilah told you that? She encouraged this? Crystal nodded. She said you were a good woman, but that you weren't enough for Marcus, that he'd chosen poorly when he was young, and now he was correcting his mistake. She said eventually he'd leave you once his daughters were grown, but that he was too honorable to abandon them while they still needed him. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that was even uglier than I'd imagined. Delilah hadn't just known about the affair. She'd orchestrated it, encouraged it, provided religious justification for it. She'd probably even helped Marcus find Crystal, set up the apartment, create the elaborate infrastructure of lies necessary to maintain two families. Did Marcus ever talk about leaving me? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Crystal looked uncomfortable. He said once his younger daughter graduated high school, he'd file for divorce. He said it was only 2 more years, and then we could be together properly. Get married, be a real family. He promised my kids that he'd be their full-time dad soon. They were so excited. Emma was 17. 2 more years would have been right after her graduation. Marcus had been planning his exit, had been counting down the days until he could abandon one family for another, and I'd had no idea. I have his other phone, I said, the one he kept hidden. There are messages between him and his mother. Messages about you and your kids. Would you be willing to testify to what you just told me? Would you be willing to tell people the truth about what Delilah said to you? How she encouraged this whole thing? Crystal looked scared now. Testify where? To who? I don't want any trouble. I have my kids to think about. I understood her fear, but I needed her. Delilah is telling people that I'm unstable, that I kept her away from Marcus, that I'm a bad mother. She's spreading lies that are affecting my daughters. I need to prove that she's not who she pretends to be. And you're the only one who can back up what I'm saying. Crystal shook her head. I can't get involved in family drama. Marcus is gone, and I need to move on. Help my kids move on. Whatever is happening between you and his mother, I can't be part of it. She opened the car door. I really am sorry about everything, but please don't contact me again. I watched her drive away, feeling the opportunity slip through my fingers. She was right to protect herself and her kids, but it left me back where I started, with a story no one would believe, and evidence that could be dismissed as fake or taken out of context. I sat in that parking lot for another hour, trying to figure out my next move, when my phone rang. It was Sophie. "Mom, where are you?" she asked, her voice tight with panic. "Grandma is here. She brought a bunch of people from her church and they're saying they need to do an intervention. They won't leave. Emma is freaking out. I don't know what to do. I started the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Lock yourselves in Emma's room, I said. Don't open the door for anyone. I'm coming home right now. I broke every speed limit getting back to our house, pulled into the driveway so fast I nearly hit the mailbox. There were 4 cars parked on the street, and through our front window I could see people moving around inside our house. I burst through the front door to find Delilah standing in my living room with 6 other people, all of them dressed in the kind of business casual that suggested they'd come straight from church offices. Pastor Mike was there, looking uncomfortable but determined. 2 older women I didn't recognize were examining our family photos on the mantel. A younger couple stood by the kitchen doorway, the woman holding a notebook and pen. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I demanded. Delilah turned to me with that wounded expression she'd perfected. "We're here to help, dear. The girls let us in. They're so confused, so hurt. Pastor Mike suggested we come by to offer spiritual guidance and support. We're just concerned about the well-being of these poor children." Pastor Mike stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mrs. Harrison, please understand that we're not here to judge or interfere, but Delilah has shared some concerning things with us, and we have a responsibility to ensure that Emma and Sophie are in a safe, stable environment." "Get out," I said, my voice deadly calm. "All of you. Get out of my house right now." The older woman with the notebook looked at Pastor Mike. "She seems very agitated," she said, writing something down. This is consistent with what Delilah described. I realized with a sinking feeling what this was. They were documenting my behavior, building a case that I was unfit, unstable. Every reaction I had would be used as evidence against me. "I'm agitated because strangers are in my home without permission," I said, forcing myself to speak slowly and clearly. "My daughters are minors and I did not authorize any of you to be here. You're trespassing." Delilah laughed. A brittle sound. "Trespassing? In my son's house? Richard and I co-signed the mortgage on this place. We have every right to be here, especially when we're worried about our granddaughters." That wasn't true. They'd offered to co-sign, but we'd never taken them up on it. But contradicting her in front of witnesses would just make me look more unstable. Pastor Mike cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all sit down and talk about this calmly. Mrs. Harrison, I understand you're going through a difficult time. Losing a spouse is one of life's greatest challenges. But Delilah has told us some things that concern us. Things about Marcus's final days, about decisions you've been making regarding the girl's welfare, about some rather serious allegations you've been making regarding his character." I could see Emma's door open a crack upstairs. Could see my daughters listening. I needed to handle this carefully, needed to not give these people any ammunition to use against me later. "What exactly has Delilah told you?" I asked. The pastor exchanged a glance with Delilah, who nodded as if giving him permission to continue. "She's told us that you've been spreading false rumors about Marcus, claiming he was unfaithful, that you've shown the girls some kind of fabricated evidence designed to turn them against their father's memory and their grandparents. She's also concerned that you're isolating the girls, keeping them away from their church family, refusing offers of help and support." "And you believed her," I said flatly. "You came into my home based on the word of one person, without talking to me or my daughters, without verifying anything she said." The woman with the notebook was writing frantically. Pastor Mike looked genuinely troubled now. "Mrs. Harrison, Delilah is a respected member of our community. She's been with our church for decades, has volunteered countless hours, has never given us any reason to doubt her word. You, on the other hand, stopped attending services years ago. We don't know you. We don't have any relationship with you or your daughters. Can you understand why we might be more inclined to trust someone we know?" The logic was sound and infuriating. Of course they'd believe Delilah. She'd spent 30 years building credibility with these people while I'd been living my life outside their community. I had no standing, no history, no trust to draw on. "I'd like you all to leave now," I said. "If you have concerns about my daughter's welfare, you're welcome to contact Child Protective Services and let them investigate properly. But this," I gestured at the group standing in my living room, "this is not appropriate." Delilah's mask slipped again, just for a second, and I saw satisfaction in her eyes. She'd gotten what she wanted. She'd demonstrated her power, shown me that she had an army of people willing to invade my home on her word, proven that I was alone in this fight. "We'll go," Pastor Mike said. "But Mrs. Harrison, please know that our church is here for you if you need us. And we'll be checking in on Emma and Sophie regularly, just to make sure they're doing all right. It was a threat disguised as an offer of support. They'd be watching us now, looking for any sign that I was failing as a mother, any evidence that Delilah's concerns were justified. The group filed out slowly, each person giving me looks that ranged from pity to disapproval. Delilah was the last to leave. She stopped at the door and turned back. "I'm doing this because I love those girls," she said. "I won't let you destroy them the way you're trying to destroy Marcus's memory. He was a good man, and I won't stand by while you tell lies about him." After they left, Emma and Sophie came downstairs. Emma was crying, her face blotchy and red. Sophie looked furious. "They came to the door and said Grandma had sent them to help us," Emma said. "They seemed nice at first, asking if we were okay, if we needed anything. I thought it was weird, but I let them in because they said they just wanted to pray with us. Then more people showed up, and Grandma arrived, and it turned into this whole thing about you and Dad and how we needed protection from your delusions. One of the women asked me if you'd been acting strange, if you'd been saying crazy things about Dad. I didn't know what to say. I pulled both girls close. 'This is my fault,' I said. 'I should have anticipated this. Delilah isn't just spreading rumors. She's building a case to try to take you away from me, to prove I'm an unfit mother.' Sophie pulled back, her eyes wide. 'She can't do that, can she?' 'I don't know,' I admitted. 'But she has resources we don't have. She has a whole church backing her up. People willing to testify that I'm unstable, that you're in danger. We need to be very careful from now on. No letting anyone in the house without calling me first. No talking to people from their church without me present. And we need to document everything. Every time Delilah contacts us, every person who comes to the door, every lie we hear that she's spreading." Emma wiped her eyes. "What about Crystal? Did you talk to her?" I told them about the meeting, about Crystal's belief that I'd known about her, about the fake texts Marcus had created, about Delilah's role in encouraging the whole arrangement. Sophie's face went pale. "Grandma told Crystal that it was okay for Dad to have two families, that it was God's plan or whatever?" She looked sick. "That's insane. That's absolutely insane." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my living room, the way those church people had looked at me, the way they'd automatically believed Delilah's version of events. I thought about Crystal's fear, her refusal to get involved, the way she'd protected herself and her children by walking away. I thought about Marcus's other kids, who'd lost their father just like Emma and Sophie had, who'd been promised a future that would never come. And I thought about Delilah, sitting in her perfect house with her perfect life, orchestrating this entire nightmare from behind her mask of grief and righteousness. I pulled out Marcus's phone again, scrolled through the messages until I found what I was looking for: concrete evidence of Delilah's involvement, messages where she'd helped Marcus find the apartment, where she'd transferred money to help him support Crystal, where she'd quoted scripture to justify his double life. I took screenshots of everything, saved them to my laptop, backed them up to a cloud drive. Evidence was power, and I was going to need all the power I could get. The next week, things escalated. Sophie came home from school crying because someone had spray-painted Home Wrecker's daughter on her locker. Emma found a note shoved through our mail slot warning us that God sees all lies and punishes those who bear false witness. Our tires were slashed one night while we slept. When I called the police, they took a report but said there wasn't much they could do without witnesses or security camera footage. I started to understand that Delilah wasn't just spreading rumors. She was weaponizing her community against us, turning us into pariahs, making sure we felt the weight of her anger at every turn. Emma stopped going to her part-time job at the bookstore after a group of church women came in and loudly discussed within her hearing how tragic it was that she'd been poisoned against her father's memory by a bitter, unstable mother. Sophie's best friend Kayla's mother called to say that Sophie wasn't welcome at their house anymore, that she didn't want her daughter influenced by our toxic family situation. I made an appointment with a lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Park, who specialized in family law. I brought all my evidence: Marcus's phone, the screenshots, the timeline I'd created, documentation of every incident of harassment and vandalism. Jennifer listened carefully, reviewed everything, then leaned back in her chair with a troubled expression. "This is a complicated situation," she said. "The affair itself isn't illegal, obviously. The harassment is concerning, but it's hard to prove who's behind it. As for Delilah's attempts to paint you as an unfit mother, She hasn't actually taken any legal action yet. She's just spreading rumors and making veiled threats. I felt my hope deflating. So there's nothing I can do? Jennifer shook her head. I didn't say that. You could pursue a restraining order, but you'd need to prove that she's directly threatened you or your daughters. You could sue her for defamation, but that's expensive and difficult to win, especially when she's careful about phrasing things as concerns rather than accusations. Your best defense right now is documentation and witnesses. Keep records of everything. If she does try to pursue custody or guardianship of your daughters, you'll have evidence of her pattern of behavior. What about going public? I asked. Telling people the truth about Marcus and Delilah's role in it? Jennifer considered this carefully. That's a double-edged sword. You have evidence that your late husband was unfaithful and that his mother knew about it. But making that public could backfire. Delilah could claim you're trying to destroy a dead man's reputation out of spite, and her church community might rally around her even harder. Plus, you have to think about your daughters. Do you really want their father's infidelity to be public knowledge? They're already dealing with enough. She had a point, but I was running out of options. There has to be something I can do, I said. I can't just sit here and wait for her to ruin us. Jennifer tapped her pen against her desk. The most effective thing you could do is find allies, people who know Delilah, who've seen her true character, who'd be willing to speak up. That church of hers, is everyone really loyal to her? Or are there people who've been hurt by her in the past? People who might have their own stories to tell? I thought about the 3,000 members of Church of Eternal Grace, tried to imagine who among them might have crossed Delilah before, who might hold grudges or harbor resentments. It seemed impossible to find those people, to separate the true believers from those who were just going along with the crowd. But Jennifer was right. I needed allies, and I wasn't going to find them by hiding in my house. What about Crystal? Jennifer asked, looking at the screenshots of Marcus's messages. This woman has first-hand knowledge of Delilah's manipulation. If she testified about how Delilah encouraged the affair, justified it with religion, that would be powerful. I explained that Crystal had refused to get involved, that she was focused on protecting her own children. Jennifer nodded. She's scared. But fear can be overcome if the stakes get high enough. If she thinks her children's welfare is threatened, if she believes Delilah might come after her next, she might change her mind. Sometimes people need to see the monster up close before they're willing to fight it. That night, I lay awake, thinking about monsters and fear, and the terrible power of a community turned against you. Delilah had built an entire fortress around herself, using other people's faith, other people's trust, other people's willingness to believe that someone so devoted and pious couldn't possibly be manipulative or cruel. She'd weaponized religion, turned it into a shield that protected her from scrutiny, and a sword that cut down anyone who challenged her. And she'd done it so gradually, so carefully, that no one even noticed what she was doing. I thought about Marcus, about the man I'd married versus the man he'd become, about how easy it had been for him to compartmentalize his life into separate boxes that never had to touch. I thought about his last morning, how he'd kissed me goodbye and asked me to pick up his medication, how he'd died thinking he was going to get away with everything, that he'd successfully maintained his double life until his daughters graduated and he could make his clean exit. The unfairness of it burned in my chest. 3 days later, Emma's school counselor called me in for a meeting. Mrs. Rodriguez was a kind woman in her 50s who'd helped Emma through some anxiety issues the previous year. She looked troubled as I sat down across from her desk. I wanted to talk to you about some concerns that have been raised, she began carefully. Several members of the community have contacted the school expressing worry about Emma's home situation. They've suggested that she's under unusual stress, that there might be issues at home that are affecting her well-being. My stomach sank. Who contacted you? I asked. Mrs. Rodriguez hesitated. I can't share names, but I can tell you that the concerns came from people associated with a local church. They mentioned that Emma's grandmother has been trying to reach out but has been blocked, that there's been some kind of family crisis that Emma is caught in the middle of. I wanted to scream. Instead, I carefully explained the situation. Marcus's death, the affair, Delilah's campaign against us. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned as I spoke. Have you documented all of this? She asked when I finished. I showed her some of the evidence on my phone. The messages, the timeline, the photos of our vandalized property. Emma's grandparents are trying to use her as a weapon against me, I said. They're trying to make it look like I'm an unfit mother so they can either take the girls away or just make our lives miserable enough that we break. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I believe you, and I want you to know that from what I've seen, Emma is doing remarkably well considering what she's been through. She's keeping up with her schoolwork. She's attending classes regularly. She's participating in activities. There's no evidence from my perspective that she's in an unsafe or unhealthy environment, but I do need to file a report about the concerns that were raised, and I wanted to give you a heads up that CPS might contact you. So Delilah had escalated to involving the school. Of course she had. Why stop at just social pressure when you could try to get official agencies involved? I spent the rest of that week in a state of heightened anxiety, waiting for Child Protective Services to show up at our door. They didn't come, but the threat of it hung over everything we did. I made sure the house was spotless, made sure the fridge was full, made sure Emma and Sophie were never home alone. I felt like I was performing being a good mother for an invisible audience, hyper-aware that any mistake could be used against me. Sophie noticed. "You're stressing us out," she said one night after I'd checked her homework for the third time. "We know you're trying to protect us, but this is making everything worse. We feel like we're walking on eggshells in our own house." She was right. I was letting Delilah's campaign get inside my head, was letting the fear of judgment change how I parented my daughters. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm just scared. I'm scared of losing you both, scared of what Delilah might do next, scared that no one will believe us when we try to tell the truth." Emma sat down next to me on the couch. "Then maybe we need to stop waiting for her to make the next move," she said. "Maybe we need to go on the offensive, show people who she really is before she can do any more damage." I thought about what Jennifer had said about finding allies, about making the truth public, about the risks and rewards of exposure. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a TikTok she'd been working on, a carefully edited video that laid out the timeline of Marcus's affair, showed screenshots of some of the less explicit messages, explained Delilah's role without using her name. "I want to post this," Emma said. "I want people to know what really happened, not the version Grandma is telling. And I want people to see what she's doing to us now, the harassment, the lies, the way she's trying to destroy you just because you won't let her control the narrative. It was risky. It would make everything public in a way we couldn't control or take back. But it might also be our best chance at getting ahead of Delilah's story. Let me think about it," I said. "This is a big decision, and once we put it out there, we can't take it back. Your father's infidelity will be public knowledge. Everyone you know will see this. Are you ready for that?" Emma's jaw set in a way that reminded me of myself. Dad made his choices. Grandma is making hers. I'm making mine. I'm tired of being the victim in someone else's story. I want to tell our story, the real one, before she completely rewrites history. Sophie nodded in agreement. "I'm in too. Whatever you decide, we're in this together." I looked at my daughters, at their determined faces, at the strength they were showing in the face of everything we'd been through. They deserved better than this, better than a father who'd betrayed them, better than a grandmother who'd weaponized them, better than a mother who was paralyzed by fear. "Okay," I said, "but we do it right. We don't just post a video and hope for the best. We build a real case. We get more evidence. We find people who'll back us up. And when we're ready, we don't just tell our story. We make sure everyone hears it." Over the next 2 weeks, we became investigators in our own lives. Emma created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every incident of harassment, the vandalism, the threatening notes, the confrontations at school, the conversations with teachers and counselors that had been influenced by Delilah's whisper campaign. Sophie reached out to some of Marcus's old friends, people he'd known before he got deeply involved with his parents' church, and found 3 who admitted they'd always thought Delilah was controlling and manipulative, but had never felt comfortable saying anything. I went back through Marcus's phone with a fine-tooth comb, finding more evidence of Delilah's involvement. Text messages where she'd helped him shop for furniture for Crystal's apartment. Emails where she'd discussed the situation with Richard using coded language about Marcus's expanding family responsibilities. We printed everything, organized it chronologically, created a narrative that was undeniable in its ugliness. And then I did something I'd been avoiding. I reached back out to Crystal. I sent her a carefully worded email explaining that Delilah was now targeting my daughters, that the harassment had escalated beyond just reputation damage to actual threats and vandalism, that I needed her help not for revenge but for protection. I didn't expect a response. Crystal had made her position clear. She wanted to stay out of it, wanted to protect her own children from the fallout. But 3 days later, she replied, "Meet me at the same Starbucks. Tomorrow at 10, come alone." I was there 15 minutes early, nursing a coffee I didn't want, watching the door with a mixture of hope and dread. Crystal arrived exactly on time, looking tired and nervous. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about Delilah targeting your daughters. After we talked last time, I started paying attention to some things I'd been ignoring, things that didn't quite add up." She pulled out her own phone, scrolled to a series of messages. "These are from Delilah. She sent them about a week after Marcus died." I read the messages, feeling my blood pressure rise with each one. Delilah had told Crystal that I was unstable and dangerous, that I'd threatened to expose Marcus's children to the media, that I'd said terrible things about Crystal and was planning to make her life hell out of jealousy and spite. None of it was true. "I didn't know whether to believe her or not," Crystal said quietly. "I wanted to think she was just a grieving mother being protective, but then yesterday, 2 women from her church showed up at my apartment. They said they were from a family outreach ministry, and they wanted to talk to me about my relationship with Marcus. They asked really specific questions. How long we'd been together, whether Marcus had promised to leave you, whether I had any documentation of his financial support for my kids. It felt like they were building some kind of case, gathering information for something. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "Nothing," Crystal said. "I told them I didn't know what they were talking about and asked them to leave, but it scared me. Why would Delilah send people to investigate me? What is she trying to do?" I had a theory. One that made my stomach turn. "She's trying to rewrite history. If she can paint me as unstable and you as a predator who seduced her innocent son, then she becomes the victim. She can claim that Marcus was led astray by both of us, that he was manipulated and corrupted, that his only crime was being too trusting and too generous. It absolves him completely and makes her the suffering saint who tried to save him from wicked women." Crystal's face went pale. "That's insane. Marcus pursued me. He lied to me about your marriage. He set up the whole arrangement. I didn't seduce anyone." She paused, then added bitterly, "And Delilah was the one who encouraged it. She told me I was doing God's work by giving Marcus the large family he deserved. She made it sound noble." "I know," I said. "And that's why I need you to tell people what really happened, not just about Marcus and the affair, but about Delilah's role in it, about the way she manipulated both of us, justified everything with religion, created the whole toxic situation." Crystal was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "If I do this, if I come forward, she'll destroy me. You know that, right? She has an entire church behind her. I'm a single mother with 2 kids and a customer service job. I don't have the resources to fight her." I understood her fear. I was living it every day. "But if you don't come forward, she might come after you anyway," I said. "Those women showing up at your apartment, that was a warning shot. Delilah is tying up loose ends, making sure everyone's story aligns with hers. Right now, you're a liability to her narrative. She needs you to either disappear or be discredited. Either way, you're in danger." Crystal looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I loved him," she said. "I really loved Marcus. I thought we were going to have a life together. I thought my kids would finally have a stable father figure. And now I find out that everything was a lie, that he was using me just like he was using you, that his mother was pulling strings the whole time. How did I not see it?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Because he was good at lying, because Delilah was good at manipulation, because we both wanted to believe what they were telling us. But we can't change the past. All we can do is protect ourselves and our children from what's happening now." Crystal wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath, and nodded. "Okay, tell me what you need from me." I pulled out a folder I'd prepared, showed her the evidence I'd gathered, explained the pattern of harassment and intimidation. "I need you to make a statement," I said. "Written or video, your choice. I need you to explain your relationship with Marcus, what Delilah told you, how she encouraged and facilitated everything. I need documentation. Any messages she sent you, any gifts she gave your kids, anything that proves she was involved." Crystal agreed to go through her messages and photos that evening, to compile everything that showed Delilah's participation in Marcus's double life. "But I want something in return," she said. "I want protection. If this blows up, if Delilah comes after me harder, I need to know you'll help me. I can't fight her alone. I couldn't promise we'd win. Couldn't promise Delilah wouldn't find ways to hurt us all. But I could promise we'd fight together. We're stronger as a united front. I said. Separately, we're just two women making accusations against a pillar of the community. Together, we're a pattern. We're proof that this isn't about one person's instability or bitterness. It's about Delilah's systematic manipulation of everyone around her. Crystal left with my phone number and a promise to send me everything she found. I drove home feeling, for the first time in weeks, like maybe we had a chance. Like maybe the truth would actually matter. That night, Crystal sent me 47 screenshots. Messages from Delilah spanning 4 years, starting from before Crystal and Marcus even got together. In the earliest messages, Delilah was introducing Marcus to Crystal, describing him as a good Christian man who needs a woman who understands traditional values. There were messages about apartments Delilah had found for them, furniture she'd helped purchase, even a message about how to structure their relationship to avoid legal complications. There were photos of Delilah with Crystal's children, smiling and affectionate, playing the doting grandmother. And there were messages from just after Marcus died, Delilah telling Crystal to lay low for a while, to let things settle down, to remember that what we had was special and pure, but the world wouldn't understand. It was all there, a complete record of Delilah's involvement, her encouragement, her active participation in building and maintaining Marcus's secret life. I stayed up until 3 a.m. organizing everything, creating a timeline that showed exactly when and how Delilah had orchestrated events. By the time I finally went to bed, I had a case that was irrefutable. The next morning, I called Jennifer Park and asked for an emergency meeting. She cleared her schedule for that afternoon, and I brought Emma, Sophie, and all our evidence. Jennifer spent 2 hours reviewing everything: Marcus's phone, Crystal's messages, the documentation of harassment, the school reports, the police reports about the vandalism. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim but determined. "This is actionable," she said. "We can pursue restraining orders based on the harassment. We can file a defamation suit based on the false statements she's made to the school and other institutions. And we can create a package of evidence that will protect you if she tries to pursue custody or guardianship." She paused, tapping her pen against the desk. "But I think there's something else we should consider, something more comprehensive." She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out a strategy. Delilah has been operating with impunity because she controls the narrative within her community. What if we changed the venue? What if we took this public in a way that bypassed her church entirely? "What do you mean?" I asked. Jennifer looked at Emma. "Your daughter mentioned wanting to post about this on social media. I initially thought that was too risky, but given the evidence you've compiled, given how systematic and documented Delilah's behavior has been, maybe controlled public exposure is exactly what we need. Not just a TikTok video, though, something more strategic. We create a comprehensive presentation of the facts, release it simultaneously across multiple platforms, and include an invitation for anyone else who's been hurt by Delilah to come forward with their stories." She was talking about going nuclear, about creating a firestorm that would force people to pay attention. "That could backfire spectacularly," I said. "It could make us look vindictive, could open us up to more legal action from Delilah." Jennifer nodded. "It absolutely could. But consider your current trajectory. Delilah is systematically destroying your reputation within her sphere of influence. She's already contacted your daughter's school, has people showing up at your house, has mobilized her church community against you. How much worse can it get? At least this way, you control when and how the information comes out. You get ahead of her narrative instead of constantly reacting to it." Emma was nodding enthusiastically. "We could create a website, lay out everything chronologically with evidence, make it impossible to dismiss as just bitter family drama," Sophie added. "And we could include a way for other people to submit their stories. Grandma has been in that church for 30 years. There's no way we're the first people she's done something like this to." I thought about the risk, about the potential consequences, about how public and permanent such an action would be. But I also thought about the 3 women from the family outreach ministry showing up at Crystal's apartment, about Emma's vandalized locker, about the invasion of my home by Pastor Mike and his group, about the slow, systematic dismantling of our lives while Delilah sat in her perfect house and pulled strings. "If we do this," I said slowly, "we do it right. We fact-check everything 3 times. We redact information about Crystal's children to protect them. We make it about Delilah's pattern of behavior, not just about Marcus's affair. And we prepare for the worst-case scenario, that her church rallies around her even harder, That we become even bigger targets. Jennifer smiled grimly. I'll prepare cease and desist letters to send simultaneously with the release. We'll make it clear that any further harassment will result in immediate legal action. Over the next week, we built our case like lawyers preparing for trial. Emma designed a website that was clean, professional, and devastating in its presentation of facts. We titled it, The Truth About Delilah Harrison, a Pattern of Manipulation and Spiritual Abuse. Each section was meticulously documented, Marcus's affair and Delilah's knowledge of it, Crystal's testimony about being encouraged and facilitated, the harassment campaign against our family, the false reports to schools and institutions, the invasion of our home. We included screenshots with faces blurred for privacy, included dates and times, included context for everything. Sophie wrote an introduction that was powerful in its simplicity. This website exists because my grandmother has spent months destroying my mother's reputation with lies. We tried to handle this privately. We tried to protect our family's privacy and my father's memory, but Delilah Harrison gave us no choice. The following is the truth, backed by evidence. Judge for yourselves. We set up a secure form where people could submit their own experiences with Delilah, with safeguards to verify submissions and protect anonymity if requested. 3 days before we were set to launch the website, something happened that changed everything. Sophie came home from the grocery store in tears, her face red and puffy, her hands shaking. They surrounded me, she said, in the parking lot. There were like 15 of them, all from Grandma's church. They formed a circle around me and started praying loudly, talking about demons and deception and saving me from my mother's influence. People were staring. Someone recorded it on their phone. I was so scared, Mom. They wouldn't let me leave. They kept saying I needed to come with them, that Grandma was waiting to restore me to righteousness. I finally just pushed through them and ran to the car, but they followed me, banging on the windows, trying to get me to open the door. Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a video that was already circulating on Facebook. 15 or 20 people, mostly middle-aged women, surrounding my 17-year-old daughter in a grocery store parking lot, their hands raised, their voices loud and fervent as they prayed over her. Sophie looked terrified in the video, small and trapped, trying to politely extract herself while they pressed in closer. The caption on the video read, "Prayer warriors intervening to save a troubled teen from an abusive home situation. Please pray for this family." The comments were a mix of, "Amen," and "Poor child," and "God bless these faithful servants." A few people asked questions. Does she want to be prayed over? And this seems aggressive, but they were drowned out by support for the prayer warriors. I felt something break inside me. They'd gone after my daughter. They'd surrounded her, intimidated her, created a public spectacle designed to humiliate and frighten her, and they'd done it while convinced they were doing God's work, while believing they were the heroes of this story. That's it, I said. We're not waiting 3 more days. We launch tonight, Jennifer agreed. She expedited the cease and desist letters, prepared statements for us to give if media outlets picked up the story, and advised us to forward the parking lot video to the police as evidence of harassment. Emma made the website live at 8 p.m. Sophie posted links on her social media with the simple caption, "The Truth About My Grandmother." I sent the link to everyone in my contact list with a message explaining that we'd tried to handle this privately, but had been left with no choice. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the website had 500 views. Within 3 hours, it had 5,000. People started sharing it on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. The parking lot video was reposted alongside our website with new context. This is what they did to her daughter while calling it prayer. Comment sections exploded with people debating, questioning, some defending Delilah, but many more expressing shock and horror at the documented evidence. And then, around midnight, the submissions started coming in through our anonymous form. The first was from a woman named Patricia, who said Delilah had orchestrated a similar character assassination campaign against her 15 years ago, when Patricia had questioned the church's financial practices. The second was from a former church member who said Delilah had convinced his wife that he was possessed by demons, leading to their divorce. The third was from someone who'd been close to the family years ago, who said Richard and Delilah had pressured another son, Marcus had had an older brother who'd died in his 20s, to stay in an abusive relationship because divorce would be shameful to the family name. By morning, we had 37 submissions. By the end of the second day, we had over 200. People were coming forward with stories of manipulation, spiritual abuse, financial exploitation, character assassination campaigns. A pattern emerged. Delilah targeted people who threatened her control or her image, used her position in the church to mobilize others against them, and systematically destroyed their reputations while presenting herself as the victim or the concerned party trying to help. She'd been doing this for decades, and no one had ever successfully called her out because she was too well connected, too respected, too careful about maintaining her image. But now the dam had broken. People felt safe sharing their stories because they weren't alone, because there was documented evidence, because it wasn't just one angry family making accusations. Local news outlets started picking up the story. Megachurch member accused of decade-long pattern of manipulation and harassment. The Church of Eternal Grace issued a statement saying they were investigating the allegations and taking them seriously, which was church speak for, "We're in damage control mode." Pastor Mike called me. "Mrs. Harrison, I owe you an apology. I came into your home making assumptions based on what I'd been told by someone I trusted. I should have investigated more thoroughly. I should have talked to you and your daughters before taking any action." His voice was heavy with regret. "I'm not the only one who's realizing we've been manipulated. Several members of our leadership team have been reading through the testimonies on your website. We're beginning to understand that Delilah's behavior is part of a much larger pattern." I appreciated his apology, but I wasn't ready to absolve him completely. "You invaded my home with a group of people and treated me like I was unfit to parent my own children. You did that based on the word of one person, without any verification or due diligence. That's not just a mistake. That's a fundamental failure of judgment." Pastor Mike was quiet for a moment. "You're right, and I'll have to live with that. But I want you to know that there will be consequences for Delilah's actions. We're beginning a formal investigation into her conduct, and depending on what we find, she may face disciplinary action up to and including removal from membership." 3 days after we launched the website, Richard showed up at my door alone. He looked older than I remembered, diminished somehow, his granite facade cracking to show the exhaustion underneath. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I almost said no, but something in his expression stopped me. "You have 5 minutes," I said, leaving him standing in the foyer. "Delilah doesn't know I'm here," he began. "She thinks I'm at a golf meeting, but I needed to talk to you, to try to explain." He ran a hand over his face, and I noticed his hands were shaking. "I've been married to Delilah for 43 years, and for 43 years I've watched her manipulate and control and destroy anyone who got in her way. Marcus was her favorite target. She molded him into exactly what she wanted, and when he tried to break free, she found ways to pull him back. The affair with Crystal, that was Delilah's idea. She wanted Marcus to have more children, wanted to build some kind of dynasty, but you'd made it clear you were done having kids. So she found Crystal, arranged the introduction, and convinced Marcus it was God's will. I felt like the floor was tilting under me. "Why are you telling me this?" Richard looked at me with something like desperation in his eyes. "Because she's not going to stop. Even with everything that's come out, even with the church investigating her, she's already planning her next move. She's convinced herself that this is all a test from God, that she's being persecuted for her faith, that she needs to fight harder to protect Marcus's legacy. She's talking about suing you for defamation, about finding ways to prove all those testimonies on your website are fabricated, about exposing Crystal as a liar and a homewrecker. She's not capable of seeing that she's wrong. She's never been capable of that." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I came to warn you, but I also came to give you something." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "These are letters from Marcus to his mother over the years. He kept copies of everything, stored them in a safety deposit box I only found after he died. They tell the whole story, how trapped he felt, how guilty he was about the affair, how he wanted to end it, but Delilah kept pressuring him to maintain both families, how he was planning to tell you everything after Emma graduated. She was the one who told him not to. She was the one who said it would destroy you unnecessarily, that it was kinder to just leave quietly." I opened the envelope with shaking hands and saw Marcus's handwriting. Page after page of letters to his mother. Letters where he called himself a coward, where he begged her to let him do the right thing, where he expressed anguish over the lies he was living, and letters where Delilah responded with Bible verses and manipulation, convincing him that his suffering was noble, that he was providing for 2 families like a patriarch of old, that confessing to me would be selfish and cruel. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked Richard. Why now? Richard's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm done. I'm done being complicit in her destruction. I'm done watching her hurt people and pretending it's righteous. Marcus is dead, and maybe if I'd stopped her years ago, if I'd stood up to her instead of just going along with whatever she wanted, he'd still be alive, happy, honest. But I didn't. And now I have to live with that. The least I can do is make sure she can't hurt you and your daughters any more than she already has. I stood there holding the letters, looking at this broken man who'd been enabling his wife's toxicity for over 4 decades, trying to decide if his conscience was worth anything at this late stage. What will you do? I asked. If I use these letters? If I add them to the evidence against Delilah, she'll know they came from you. Richard nodded. I know. I'm prepared for that. I've already contacted a divorce attorney. I'm 71 years old and I'd like to spend whatever time I have left with some semblance of integrity, even if it means admitting I had none for most of my life. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Marcus did love you, you know, and he loved Emma and Sophie. He was just weak. We made him weak. Delilah and I. We taught him that image mattered more than truth, that keeping up appearances was more important than authentic relationships. That's our sin, and we have to answer for it. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table reading Marcus's letters. They painted a picture of a man in agony, trapped between the life he'd created and the life his mother insisted he maintain. In one letter, he wrote, I'm not strong enough to be the person I should be. Every day I wake up and promise myself I'll tell her the truth, and every day I find another excuse to wait. Mom, I need you to release me from this. I need your permission to blow everything up and start over honestly, even if it means disappointing you. Delilah's response was preserved on the next page. Disappointment is temporary. Divorce is permanent. Those girls need their father in their home, even if you need to find fulfillment elsewhere. This is your cross to bear, Marcus. God doesn't give us burdens we can't handle. You are being refined by fire. I added the letters to our website under a new section titled Marcus's Own Words. The impact was seismic. Whatever sympathy Delilah had retained evaporated when people read her son's anguished pleas and her cold, manipulative responses. The narrative shifted from complicated family drama to documented spiritual abuse and manipulation leading to psychological torture. 3 major news outlets requested interviews. Dr. Phil's producers reached out. A filmmaker asked about potentially developing the story into a documentary about spiritual abuse in megachurches. The Church of Eternal Grace announced that Delilah had been removed from all leadership positions and was no longer welcome at services pending the outcome of their investigation. Richard filed for divorce and moved into a hotel, releasing a statement that said, I enabled my wife's destructive behavior for too long. I apologize to everyone she hurt, especially my granddaughters and daughter-in-law, who deserved better from all of us. 2 weeks after we launched the website, Delilah's lawyer sent us a cease and desist letter threatening legal action for defamation. Jennifer laughed when she read it. Good luck with that. Every single thing on that website is documented and verifiable. If she sues, she'll just have to answer questions under oath about all of it. The letter demanded we take down the website and issue a public apology, claiming that we'd destroyed the reputation of a devout Christian woman through a coordinated campaign of lies and manipulation. It was almost funny how she described herself using exactly the tactics she'd employed against us. We didn't take down the website. Instead, we added a new section responding to the cease and desist, explaining that we stood by every word and invited Delilah to sue us if she believed anything was false. Discovery will be fascinating, Jennifer noted dryly. Delilah didn't sue. Instead, she gave an interview to a Christian news outlet where she positioned herself as a victim of cancel culture and persecution for traditional values. She cried photogenic tears and talked about how painful it was to be betrayed by family and abandoned in her grief. The interview backfired spectacularly. People who'd submitted testimonies to our website came forward publicly to challenge her victim narrative. Patricia, the woman who'd been targeted 15 years ago, appeared on a local news program with documentation of how Delilah had orchestrated her firing from the church's administrative staff after she'd questioned financial irregularities. Another former church member brought receipts showing how Delilah had collected money for his daughter's medical treatment and then kept most of it for herself, claiming it was administrative fees for organizing the fundraiser. The pattern was undeniable. Delilah targeted, manipulated, and destroyed, then played the victim when people fought back. She'd gotten away with it for decades because she did it within the closed system of a church community that trusted her, that wanted to believe the best about one of their most devoted members. But once the pattern was exposed, once people started comparing notes and realizing they weren't alone, the house of cards collapsed. Crystal called me 3 months after we'd launched the website. "I wanted you to know that I'm doing okay," she said. "My kids are in therapy, working through everything, and I've started talking to some other people who were involved with men in similar situations. Other second families who were told that plural relationships were God's will, or that they were doing something noble. There are more of us than I realized." She paused. "Thank you for fighting back. For not just accepting what Delilah was doing. Watching you stand up to her gave me the courage to be honest about what happened to me. We'd become unlikely allies, Crystal and I. 2 women who'd loved the same man, who'd been manipulated by the same monster, who'd found strength in refusing to be erased or silenced." Emma graduated from high school that spring. She gave a speech at her graduation ceremony about truth and courage and breaking cycles of abuse. She didn't name Delilah, but everyone in the audience knew who she was talking about. Sophie was thriving in college, studying psychology with a focus on spiritual abuse and manipulation in religious communities. She wanted to help other people recognize and escape toxic systems. 6 months after we'd gone public, I was at the grocery store, the same one where Sophie had been surrounded by the prayer warriors, when I saw Delilah. She was alone, pushing a cart slowly down the canned goods aisle, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Our eyes met across the aisle. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Delilah opened her mouth, closed it, and turned her cart in the opposite direction. I watched her walk away, this woman who'd tried so hard to destroy us, who'd wielded religion like a weapon and community like a shield. She looked defeated, diminished, stripped of the power she'd held for so long. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, relieved, but tired. I'd spent months fighting, documenting, exposing. I'd turned my family's most painful moments into a public case study. I'd sacrificed our privacy and Marcus's memory on the altar of truth. Had it been worth it? I looked at my cart, at the ordinary groceries I was buying for my daughters who were healing and growing and learning to trust again, at the life we were rebuilding without lies, without manipulation, without the weight of someone else's narrative crushing us. Yes, it had been worth it. That night, Emma showed me a message she'd received through the website. It was from a young woman who said she'd been in a similar situation, trapped between her husband's affair that his family encouraged and her own sense that something was deeply wrong. "Your story gave me permission to name what was happening to me," the woman wrote, "to stop wondering if I was crazy or oversensitive, to fight back. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth." Emma smiled at me, that fierce, proud smile that reminded me she was Marcus's daughter, but also fully herself. "We helped someone," she said. "That makes everything worth it, doesn't it?" I thought about all the people who'd submitted their stories, who'd finally felt safe enough to speak up because we'd spoken first. About Patricia and the others who'd been isolated in their pain until they realized they weren't alone. About the pattern we'd exposed, the system we'd challenged, the silence we'd broken. "Yeah," I said, "it does." A year after Marcus died, I sold our house and bought a smaller place across town. Emma and Sophie helped me pack up our old life, deciding what to keep and what to let go. We found Marcus's things in the attic, his college yearbooks, his old baseball glove, photos from before his parents' influence became overwhelming. "He wasn't all bad," Sophie said, holding a picture of Marcus holding her as a baby, his face open and genuine in a way I'd forgotten he could be. "He made bad choices, but he loved us. I think he just didn't know how to be strong enough to choose us over what his mom wanted." Emma nodded. "Grandma broke him. She broke Dad, and she tried to break us. But we didn't let her. We didn't let her." That was the story I wanted to focus on, not the betrayal or the lies or the months of harassment, but the fact that when we were tested, when we were pushed to our limits, we'd found strength we didn't know we had. We'd stood up, we'd told the truth, we'd protected each other, and we'd survived. The new house was bright and small and entirely ours. No ghosts of Marcus's lies. No memories of Delilah's invasions, no weight of expectations or appearances to maintain. Just the 3 of us, building something new from the ashes of what we'd lost. On our first night there, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating off paper plates because we hadn't unpacked the dishes yet. "To new beginnings," Emma said, raising her soda can. "To telling the truth." Sophie added. To breaking cycles, I said, and we clinked our cans together. 3 survivors of the same war, stronger together than we'd ever been apart. Outside, the sun was setting over a neighborhood that didn't know our story, that saw us as just another family moving in. Inside, we were writing a new chapter, one where we got to choose our own narrative, where truth mattered more than appearances, where love meant protecting each other fiercely, not manipulating each other endlessly. Delilah sent one final message. 6 months after we'd moved. It came through a lawyer, a formal letter requesting a meeting to discuss reconciliation and healing. The letter claimed she'd been in therapy, that she'd come to recognize some of her mistakes, that she wanted to make amends before it was too late. Jennifer advised me that it was probably genuine. People facing their mortality often try to repair relationships they'd damaged. But, she added, genuine regret doesn't obligate you to forgive. You get to decide what relationship, if any, you want with this woman. I showed the letter to Emma and Sophie. What do you think? I asked. They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings have. Finally, Emma spoke. I think Grandma is sorry she got caught and lost her power. I don't think she's actually sorry for what she did. And even if she is, that doesn't mean we have to let her back into our lives. Sometimes the healthiest thing is to just close the door and move forward. Sophie nodded. She had so many chances to do the right thing. When Dad was alive and suffering, when he died and she could have told us the truth, when she started spreading lies about us, she could have stopped. She made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. That's not cruel. That's just natural. They were right. We'd spent enough time and energy on Delilah. We'd exposed her, protected ourselves, helped others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. We'd done what needed to be done, but we didn't owe her absolution, didn't owe her a place in our future, didn't owe her the healing she'd denied us when we needed it. I wrote back through Jennifer. We acknowledge your request for reconciliation. At this time, we are not ready for that conversation. We wish you well in your personal growth, but we need to focus on our own healing. Please do not contact us again. It felt like closing a book, finishing a story that had taken too much from us already. It felt like freedom. 2 years after everything started, Emma left for college. Sophie was thriving in her junior year, already planning graduate school in clinical psychology. I'd gotten a promotion at work, had started dating again, nothing serious yet, just remembering what it felt like to be seen as myself, not as Marcus's widow, or Delilah's victim, or anyone's adversary. The website was still up, still receiving occasional submissions from people discovering their own stories in the pattern we'd documented. We'd helped create a resource, a warning system, a way for people to recognize spiritual abuse and manipulation before it destroyed them completely. That felt like legacy enough. One evening, I was cleaning out old files when I found Marcus's last letter to his mother, the one Richard had given me. I read it again, this passage standing out. I'm teaching my daughters that image is everything, that truth can be sacrificed for appearances, that love means control rather than freedom. What kind of father does that make me? What kind of man? He'd known. On some level, Marcus had understood what he was doing to us, what he was perpetuating. He just hadn't been strong enough to stop it. But we had. Emma and Sophie had learned a different lesson. They'd learned that truth matters more than appearances, that protecting yourself isn't selfish, that real love means honesty even when it's hard. They'd broken the cycle. I put the letter in a box marked, for later, things I wanted to keep but didn't need to look at every day. Someday, maybe when Emma and Sophie were older, when they had families of their own, we'd go through these artifacts of our darkest time and decide what was worth passing down and what was better left in the past. But for now, we were focused on the present, on Sophie's psychology research that was helping other survivors of spiritual abuse, on Emma's volunteer work with a nonprofit that helped families escape toxic religious environments, on my own journey toward trusting myself again, toward believing that I was strong enough to recognize manipulation and brave enough to fight it. We'd survived Delilah. More than that, we'd transformed our survival into something that helped others. We'd taken the worst thing that had happened to us and turned it into light, into warning, into hope for people still trapped in darkness. On the 3rd anniversary of Marcus's death, we didn't go to his grave. We didn't mark the occasion with tears or remembrance rituals. Instead, we went to the beach, the 3 of us, and we built a sandcastle, just a silly, imperfect sandcastle that would wash away with the tide. To impermanence, Emma said as we watched the waves come in. To letting go, Sophie added. To building new things, I said, and we watched the water carry away what we'd built, knowing we could always build again, knowing we were safe now, knowing we'd protected what mattered most, each other, the truth, and our right to write our own ending.